Welcome back to another episode of Friday Financial. And today we have Jonathan Silly, who is our Chief Technology Officer here at MHV, to join us and talk about something near and dear to so many parents and guardians' hearts, and that is the world of gaming.
Yes.
So let's start, Jonathan, with the biggest question on everyone's minds. Should I be worried about my kid gaming?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's becoming more and more common today with the rise of mobile gaming and um, so many different channels or devices that you can play these games on, and they're all very social now. So I think the short answer is in terms of being worried. I think worried may be maybe the not quite the right term. I think you need to be aware of what your children are playing and what type of games they are playing. So awareness is key. Going to worry immediately may be a bit of an overreaction, but awareness is key. And that's because when you have awareness of what your child is playing or your children are playing, there's a significant difference in terms of what they might experience in a game that's what I will say self-contained, not online, so to speak, or one that is very reliant on social interactions with other players. And depending on how the game is structured and those type of social aspects, your level of awareness and your level of monitoring may need to vary depending on what's going on. So the other factor for monitoring is that as time goes on in the gaming space, the lines are being blurred between what is what constitutes an online game and what constitutes sort of a more isolated game where you're just playing what I will call in a single player environment where it's just you in the game. There's nobody else interacting with you. More and more often, there's even social interactions being applied to these what traditionally have been single player games. So that's why I say monitoring and awareness is key. Worry, maybe not so much, but that awareness is absolutely, critical.
Okay, so talk a little bit about, what are the potential dangers that people should be aware of?
Sure. So the two dangers that I think are out there today, both as a parent and as a gamer myself, having experienced some of this, really fall into two kind of overarching buckets. One is the game contents itself. What is the maturity level of the content within the game? And then the second is, the second danger or risk is really what does the social interaction look like with other players in the game? And the reason why that's a risk, I think, as a lot of people are aware of now, is that those social interactions in gaming environments can lead to bullying, predatory behavior, and also just scam related behavior. People trying to trick other players into basically handing over their digital assets in these games, so to speak, and sort of stealing them from unsuspecting players that aren't being wary of those kind of interactions. So those are the two buckets that I would fit everything into. When you're talking about those, content versus social interaction and social interactivity, the content is generally the easier of the two to control. Most games, if they're released on major platforms like PlayStation or Xbox or Switch or even through Steam, if you're playing on PC, they have maturity ratings. It's easy to see, okay, I know this game has content that's suitable for my 6-year-old versus suitable for somebody that's an adult and older. So that's where you can kind of make that easy determination. Do I want my child playing this game or not? And the other piece with content is that a lot of the parental control platforms are pretty good at understanding, hey, this game or this type of application relates to this type of audience and this type of maturity level. So I know I either need to block this or not based on the content settings that a parent has set up in that application or in that platform to monitor and control what their children are doing. So content's kind of the easy one because it's identifiable and it's easy to understand what's going to come with it. I think the more difficult risk or danger are the socially connected games and those interactions that children might have in them. They're a lot harder to control. They're dynamic. You don't know what's going to be said or not said in these interactions. And then couple not only the social interactions on the text chat side of things in these games, but then you add voice control to these types of situations where there's just no ability for anything to monitor those as a child is playing a game unless you're listening in on your own, which is not really going to be that easy to do. So there are games that have stronger controls than others. So if you're thinking about games you're playing with your kids, or your kids are playing alone, Roblox and Among Us have some pretty strong baked in parental controls where you can restrict the chat, you can restrict the voice capabilities. And so they give you a good sense of, hey, I have some control over what my child is going to experience internally within that game. And I know they're not going to be reached out to by complete strangers and have inappropriate conversations with those strangers. Where this gets a little more difficult is especially with mobile gaming, where on your phone or your tablet, if your children have those and they're playing games on those, these games generally have much more lax controls or no controls at all. So there's the text chat is more susceptible to bullying and other types of situations where the parent can't actually handle that. So, so that's where I think it becomes a little more difficult. And then there's the other just sort of situations where historically certain genres of gaming are known for communities that maybe are a little more toxic, I guess is the way to put it. There's, in the first person shooter or FPS gaming community, and those are your games like, let's say, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Counter-Strike. The voice chat especially can be fairly toxic in these communities, and that's hard to monitor. The other community that has sort of historically seen a bit of a bad rap in this regard are the multiplayer or massively multiplayer online role-playing games, the MMORPGs, where some of the social interaction on those games has really received some serious scrutiny and criticism because of the way those interactions go and the lack of monitoring that they've had. So I think, when it comes to those, since your parental controls maybe can't handle the sort of automatic monitoring of those platforms, it's going to be so important that you have open and honest conversations with your children up front about, here are your boundaries, here are the expectations, and that it's critical that your child or children feel comfortable coming to you if they are getting engaged by someone in these gaming communities that they don't feel comfortable about or feel is inappropriate. You as a parent, that's where your awareness becomes so important, because you're going to have to step in and potentially either somehow cut off that type of interaction, or that may become a situation where okay, I know this game seems like it was appropriate, but it's really not, and we're not going to allow that to be
Mm-hmm.
played on our
Yep.
devices or on
Yeah.
our PCs anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan, you're kind of going in the direction that I took with my own son, where it was a very frank conversation. It was, it's not that I don't trust you, kiddo, but
Right.
a lot of really bad things can happen to you. And that's why these restrictions are in place. And I think that did kind of help him understand that it's not that I didn't want him doing the game or I didn't necessarily want him to be able to talk to other people, but there's a reason why. There's a reason why I'm not letting you.
Exactly. I agree. And again, it's awareness is key.
Yeah.
It that understanding of what can happen and being aware of what your kids are doing online and in gaming to know that, hey, something isn't quite right with this, and I need to step in and intervene and
Mm-hmm.
understand what's going on to make sure that it's not inappropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about the downside or,
Sure.
the darker side, if you will, of gaming, but there's got to be some positives to it as well. So let's talk about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am absolutely a person, a product of what people call the Nintendo generation. I'm an older millennial or a zennial, as people might call me, and so gaming has been a part of my life since a very early age, whether it's been Nintendo consoles or Sega Genesis or PC gaming or now PlayStation 5 and Xbox. It's been around, and it's a part of my kids' lives too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of really good aspects of gaming that sometimes get overshadowed by the concern over some of these types of risks that are present. First and foremost, gaming has been shown time and time again that it really does help increase your fine motor skills and your hand-eye coordination, and it really helps you hone those. So whether you need them for playing sports or you just want to get good at games, it's absolutely a situation where playing games will improve your skills in that regard. Those functions, those motor functions. Um, the other thing that I really like about games is that a lot of them encourage real problem solving skills. Whether you're talking about, role playing games like, for example, I'm big into what is referred to as the retro gaming community. One of the large games out there is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and people have developed what they call randomizers, where they essentially will randomize the environments in these games, in these older games, and it becomes a puzzle to have to figure out how to solve and beat the game under an entirely set of new conditions. And
Mm.
so there's some serious logic and problem solving skills that the gaming community and different games can foster, and it promotes a different way of thinking. And so it's really important that kids do that. And as somebody who's um, kind of a technologist and a computer programmer by training, those problem solving skills that you start to think through in things like gaming situations, that logic applies to other areas of your life, and being able
Mm-hmm.
to think that way will help you in many other ways. So that's a pretty cool aspect of it. I think the flip side of the social environment also exists in gaming, where if you find a supportive and safe social environment, it really can foster social skill development. It can foster connections between people. And as long as it's in a positive interaction, it's a powerful thing. More and more often, our connections and our friends are being made through digital channels, whether it's gaming or other online activities. So it's hard to ignore that this is a new form of social behavior that does have a positive influence on people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right along with that, gaming fosters a sense of community, and it's
Mm-hmm.
part of, you become something larger than yourself. You're part of something larger than yourself when you join a gaming community, and you can see how these gaming communities rise, or grow through platforms and streaming platforms, specifically like Twitch,
Mm-hmm.
like YouTube, where there are just these massive communities of people that like doing these things. They're overwhelmingly positive. They're rarely truly toxic. And it's just fosters a sense of connection among
Mm-hmm.
people with similar interests. And then lastly, um, one of my favorite parts about gaming, because I generally participate in these types of events, not as a player, but more as an observer or sometimes as a volunteer, are events that promote positive social change through gaming. So whether they're organizations like Games Done Quick, Extra Life, which is run by the Children's Miracle Network hospitals, St. Jude's Play Live, the Starlight Foundation, or
Mm-hmm.
the Gaming Community Expo. These are nonprofit organizations that are actively using gaming and connecting gaming communities together to raise awareness and raise funds for, children in need. The Games Done Quick community is probably one of the biggest out there. Every year they do two events. One raises money for the Prevent Cancer Foundation, and the other raises money for Doctors Without Borders. Their events regularly raise $3 million or more per event for these organizations. It's massive.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good that comes out through these gaming communities. So I think, that's one of the things that I think, as I sit here as a gamer, I'm most proud of, because who would have thought playing, old video games to run and beat them as fast as you could raise, $3 million for
Yeah.
Doctors Without Borders. That would be unfathomable even, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy, and it's interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah. Excellent. I didn't know that, actually, that last piece you just talked about. I didn't know about all that fundraising. That's pretty awesome. So let's talk about what precautions should
Sure.
parents, guardians take as their kid gets deeper into gaming.
Yeah, I think, we've sort of touched on these a little bit already.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, as a parent, even if you're not a gamer, and I know this can be hard when you're you're sitting there going, "Wow, I'm really not that interested in Minecraft today."
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to be involved with your children and their interest in gaming, and understand what they're playing and have an understanding of what those games entail. Um, you know, just blanket saying we're not going to do this, unfortunately, rarely results in protecting or reducing risk for your kids, because they're going to find a way to play games one way or
Mm-hmm.
another.
Mm-hmm.
So you're better off, being involved and showing some interest in their hobby or their activities, versus trying to just get rid of it altogether. And I think a child who understands the games are okay, but they too need to be aware that sometimes not everybody is a great person in these communities, and that it's okay to play, but it's also important that they come to you if they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel comfortable. If they realize that you're okay with them doing these things, as long as they are also expected to come to you and say, "Hey, this doesn't feel right."
Mm-hmm.
That is a incredibly powerful first line of defense. And then I think, secondly, again, we sort of alluded to it. Part of your involvement is asking your kids what they're playing, asking them what they like to play, why do they like to play those games.
Yep.
Even better, and I think this is really important because it's hard for a parent to keep up with. Gee, what's the latest game this week that the kids are talking about? Um, if you can do it, if you, even if it's only a few times, sit down with your kids and play the game with them a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Get
Mm-hmm.
to know the ins and outs of what they're doing. You don't have to play it all the time. You don't have to become a gamer yourself, but there's no better way to know if you're comfortable with what your kids are doing than to actually sit and experience it
Yeah.
once or a couple of times to understand, one, what the game content is like, and two, what that social environment is like in the game, and are you okay with it?
Right.
Because that's going to tell you, is this something I can live with and just check up on every once in a while, or is this a game that I really just don't want
Yeah.
being played by my kids? And that's a really powerful way to get an understanding, because if you take a more hands-off approach, it's much harder to truly understand what's going on unless
Mhm.
you've experienced it yourself. And so I think that kind of touches on my next point too, which is it really comes down to finding the right mix of allowing your kids the freedom to explore and experience games while also implementing the right mix of parental controls and monitoring for their devices, their PCs, and what that looks like.
Mhm.
As a gamer, and as somebody who loves playing games, and I love that my kids love to play games, I too use parental controls on my
Mm.
kids' devices. I think that's an important tool in my tool belt, to help me understand what they're doing and protect them from negative experiences that I know I don't want them to have through gaming. And so, um, for those types of programs, there are numerous out there. I'm not going to recommend one over another,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of options out there. Some of the device manufacturers, if you have a Google phone or an Android iPhone, or an Android phone, or an iPhone, I should say, they actually have some forms of parental controls
Mhm.
built in that you can leverage. They're generally not as strong as what you're going to get through a third-party service or a third-party application, and you're probably going to need to pay at least a nominal subscription fee to get the controls you want for one of those applications. But I think it is ultimately money well spent.
Mhm.
Um, and so, with those applications or those tools, they're going to let block content and applications outright that you just have said, no, this is not okay. I know these are either, the content is way more mature than what I'm ready to have my kids experience, or the interactions on these platforms are to the point where there's just too much toxicity, or there's obvious bullying going on, those kind of things. I just don't want to have anything to do with them. And so you'll be able to block those outright with these tools. Um, the other thing these tools generally allow are the ability to, rather than block outright, but to monitor interactions or
Mhm.
monitor activity. And so that's great for platforms that you're going, yeah, these are generally okay. I think for the most part, they're pretty safe, but I want to know, how long are they spending on them? What are they using? What are they, potentially searching for? Those kind of things. So for example, uh, YouTube, my kids love YouTube,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is gaming related. They want to go and look up Minecraft videos and how to do things in Minecraft, or how to do this thing in this latest version of the Pokemon game franchise. And that's great. I have no problem with that. But there's also a lot of stuff out on YouTube that I don't want them seeing.
Yeah.
So with these parental control applications, I can say, allow my children to go out to YouTube, but tell me and report back to me, what are they searching for and what videos are they watching? And
Mhm.
so I can start to not not necessarily shut them down completely, but have conversations about, hey, I noticed you went out and watched this video today. That's cool, but let's talk about why this one may not be the most
Mhm.
appropriate for you. And let's talk about how you find something that is more appropriate. So it lets you start to have those conversations and sort of guide their experience towards what you want them to have, versus
Yeah.
maybe having them go down towards a more negative path on these platforms. And then um, lastly, there are categories of content in games that I know are perfectly safe, or
Mhm.
For example, I used Roblox and Among Us before. I know those games have controls in
Mm-hmm.
them that I can set where I'm perfectly okay letting my kids play them. And I know I've set the controls such in the games themselves where I'm limiting their ability to interact with people.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to send them friend requests because I've blocked it. They're not chatting with, complete strangers. I
Mm-hmm.
know I've got that under control. So sure, you can play that game anytime you want. I know I've got that locked down to the point where I'm comfortable with the interactions you're having. So
Right.
these tools really let you have these varying degrees of control, and that's a fantastic thing. So finding the right tool for you that works for you, that works with the devices that you have in your
Mm-hmm.
household is key. And I think that's just one other tool in your tool belt, so to speak, that allows you to monitor and really make sure your children are having the experience you want them to have gaming,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping it positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate before we part, Jonathan. I think
Sure.
you mentioned a couple of times just really being aware and being involved,
Yes.
and that is really hard, right? When it's 7 o'clock at
Hmm.
night and all you want to
Yep.
do is go to bed, and your kid
Absolutely.
wants you to come play Roblox. But it is important. I know in my case, I can vouch for the fact that has made the relationship between my son and gaming and me, or kind of like overseeing that, operate a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, and it's the other thing that I love about it, especially if you're sitting down, even just playing the games with your kids for a couple of times, 2, 3 times that they're
Hmm.
interested in. It's great. It fosters a deeper connection between you and your children too, and that's a great experience to have. And
Yeah.
my take on it is too is, who knows, you might love one of these games that they're playing and start doing it with them more regularly. So
Yeah.
I will never forget. My dad was never a gamer. Like never had he had technology, but the games were like, what is this? I'll never forget starting play when I was playing games in high school. He sat down and watched me playing one day, and he said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, it's this game called Half-Life." And said, "Hey, you know what? You can play with me." And we had more fun playing multiplayer on these games than
Yeah.
he ever expected to have. And
Yep.
that lasted through something, we did that through when I was in college, and it was something we had fun together
Yeah.
doing. And it was always goofy, and we were just messing around. But it's always interesting to develop those kind of connections with your parents as the kid, and as
Mhm.
your parent connecting with your kid.
Mhm.
Um, when you never expected to. And I think that's
Right.
just the neat thing about gaming.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right, Jonathan, thank you so much for hopping on today. That was a lot of great information, and I appreciate it. And maybe we'll have you back on a future episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Mary Claire.
Take care.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.